Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. I say good morning because that's the morning where I am in Prescott, Arizona. I've recently relocated to new digs. You can see that I'm third background in three different episodes. I'm still settling here in Arizona, but welcome everyone to this episode. It's episode number 105, and today we're going to be going through a chocolate tasting. This is going to be items that I picked up during the my cross country craft chocolate odyssey. And we're also going to be talking about some chocolates that were sent to me for reviewing and things that I picked up and have been sent to me over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I haven't had a chance to be able to sit down and work with them. If you're watching live, please go into the comments. Let me know where it is that you're connecting from. We'll get your shout out on screen. Let everybody know where it is that you're coming from, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. You can go to the comments. You can type something in. Let me know who you are. And of course, over the course of the hour, if you've got a question, just put that question in the comments and we'll get it answered to the best of our ability. So as always, for every single one of these Chocolate Life live streams, I put together a post on the Chocolate Life. So here is the homepage of the Chocolate Life as it is right now. And you can see that there is a live stream, a post for the live stream here in the top rail. If we go and click on that post, what you'll do is you'll see, boom, what it is that I've prepared for the stream. There is going to be, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. Excuse me. Let's get to the right one. Um, oh, Here we go. Um, and so here's this. So this is what we've got going on for today. I'm scrolling down here, and you'll notice down here that I have not included the links to any of the makers that I'm going to be tasting today. I don't know how many of them I'm going to get through. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lined up. I'm not sure, as I said, I'm not sure I'm going to get to all of them. There are like 27, 28 bars here that I could possibly share with you today. So after the episode, I'm going to put the links to all the companies whose products I've tasted today here on this page. If you're a member of the Chocolate Life Live, of the Chocolate Life, what you can do is you can go in and comment on this post as well. During or after the fact. So please, if you're not a member, show your support and join me here as a member of the Chocolate Life. What I want to do before I get into the main point for today's tasting is to talk a little bit about why this particular post, which was the for Tuesday's a live stream, is now got an update on it, and that's because I misspoke during the live stream, and I wanted to be able to show that I misspoke and how I misspoke. So I mentioned that I thought that Peter Boone, who is the recently retired, I suppose, CEO of Barry Callebaut, was the president of the World Cocoa Foundation, and that in fact is not the case. If we go look at the page on the governance for the board of directors of the World Cocoa Foundation, you'll see that Peter Boone is listed as the chairman of the World Cocoa Foundation, the chairman of the board of directors. And so that's a very, very important difference because it speaks to some of the internal politics within the organization. So I just wanted to say that Peter Boone was the chairman, was the CEO of Barry Callebaut, and it's not clear whether, whether or not he's still the chairman of the World Cocoa Foundation, because the World Cocoa Foundation website still lists him as the chief executive officer of Barry Callebaut. So they're behind and they're updating their website. So this is the page as it exists right now, this morning. So the changes haven't been made as yet to recognize the change in the posture or the change in the relationship of whether Peter Boone is still the chairman of the World Cocoa Foundation. I don't know. And we'll find out. I will follow that up and let people know as I find out. And hopefully the World Cocoa Foundation will update their webpage to reflect what's going on. So with all that said and all that out of the way, I want to get into today's tasting right away. And I'm going to start off with a company called Oro de Cacao. And one of the reasons why I'm starting off with Oro de Cacao this morning, this is not a brand that I picked up during my cross-country craft chocolate odyssey. It was sent to me by representatives of the maker for my comments. But one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on it, there are two. Number one is the two bars I'm going to start with this morning were winners in the 2022 Academy of Chocolate Awards. So these are award-winning bars. So I wanted to start there. And also what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit about the technology behind what it is that they're doing. So this is a chocolate bar. It's a series of chocolate bars. There are 5 that I was sent for review. There are more bars in the collection, but I have 5 bars sent for review. And all of these bars are made in a similar way. And that way is that what they do is they take the cocoa beans and then they separate them out into 4 different components. So they have the fat component. I don't know if it's a non-fat cocoa powder component, or it could be a low-fat or high-fat cocoa butter component. I'm not certain. They extract the polyphenols out of it, and then they also create a flavor component. So what they do is they take the cocoa beans, they deconstruct them, and they deconstruct them apparently at very low temperature. So they don't say what that temperature is. It's a patented process. We could go and look at the patent. I will go and see if I can find the patent. So it's an entirely different approach to making the chocolate. The claim is that they can produce a full flavor chocolate eating experience, right, without any bitterness whatsoever. That the nature of their process gets rid of bitterness irrespective of the cocoa content of the chocolate. So that's what it is that they're. Now, the question is it any good? And one of the reasons why we might suspect there are at least some people who think it's fairly good because 2 of the bars that I have with me today were award winners at the Academy of Chocolate Awards in 2022. So let's go take a look at the 70% single origin. I have an open bar. So number one, I try to stay away from tasting notes before I do things. I've tasted this and had one experience, and then I went back and tasted it again and had a different experience. So I wanted to go look at the tasting notes, which are not on the bar. The tasting notes are not on the bar, but they're on the website. And if we go and look at the ingredients, so yeah, we can see that there is dark Swiss chocolate is redundant in this particular case, but the ingredients are cocoa butter, cocoa butter, sugar, cocoa extract, right? And with a cocoa solid, so the combination of cocoa and cocoa butter is 78%, right? So that's it. What goes on, but the taste experience, according to the manufacturers, is that it's a floral start of jasmine, okay, is complemented by hints of red fruits, oranges, bananas, and spices, particularly cinnamon, right? Mild roasted notes, roasted hazelnuts. They blend unobtrusively into the overall aroma. The very subtle acidity and the barely noticeable bitterness give the Peru origin great harmony. So this is what the tasting notes are. Now, what I do want to do is that they say this is 100% natural. I suppose it depends upon your meaning of natural, because from a chocolate perspective, even though the original processing to refine the cocoa beans is done at very low temperature, what they claim is very low temperature, this is a very heavily processed chocolate. So they're processing the paste, and then they're separating it out into these 4 different components, and there has to be processing associated with those 4 components. So it's natural, quote unquote. Don't know what that means. There is no definition for it, but this is a very, very highly processed chocolate. So this is, so just so you know, I haven't eaten anything this morning. I've been very, very careful about, I brushed my teeth a couple of hours ago. So I'm trying to come at this, it's a little after 9 o'clock. I'm trying to come after this with a very, very clean palate this morning. So there's nothing that will interfere with my tasting of this. So on the nose, the only thing I get on the nose is something that I would associate with banana. Now, okay, banana is in my brain because I've read the tasting notes. The first time I tried this, I did it as an after dinner experience, and neither I nor the people none of us got anything out of this chocolate other than it was slightly boring. It was bland, I suppose is the best way to describe it. It was nondescript. Um, uh, um, Breaking it, um, I sort of, and it's green banana. So it's sort of like when you pull the peel off a banana, the aroma of the peeling a slightly underripe banana, that's what the flavor reminds me of. And let me know, please, put something in the comments if this chewing bothers anyone. I'll turn my mic off while I'm chewing. Um, Now, what I do have to say is the bite, it's crisp. Um, the chew and the melt are what I would expect from a Swiss chocolate. However, this is a high cocoa content chocolate. I don't know the ratio of non-fat solids to butter. And so I would expect it to be a little creamier than it is, just sort of on the melt. Um, but it's a very easy melt. I still don't get anything other than banana off this. It says red fruits, oranges, and cinnamon. I don't get it. Everything is dominated by the banana. Roasted hazelnuts, I'm not sure I get it. One thing that is consistent between all of these chocolates, um, except for the white chocolate, which has no powder in it, is that um, it's very, very obvious to me that this comes from a reconstituting of powder and butter. There is a very, very distinctive texture in this, and that texture is very powdery, right? So it's like they haven't done a sufficient job of refining the powder back into the butter. Um, so that's number one. And I say this because it is consistent across all of the chocolates. So we're going to go from 78 single origin Peru. We're going to go to the next award winner, which is the 82% single origin Ghana, right? And just a quick note, if anybody from Oro de Cacao is, um, um, the bars you sent are 80-gram bars. If we went back to the other bar we just tasted, the weight would be 80 grams rather than 40 grams. I can only, there's a mess in the shopping cart. Anyway, so Ghana, so varietal character with multi-layered coconuts, ripe fruit, so figs, dates, dried apples, and white pepper, which is underpinned by subtle coffee notes. After a short time, I'm still getting banana from the previous one. Apricot, bergamot, and orange blossom become perceptible. So if you could pull out all of that out of an Amelinado Forastero from Ghana, that would be great. Um, again, we had the same experience the first time through. It, again, might have been because we had just eaten something else. So, all right. So in this particular one, what I perceive is a sort of a straightforward, what I would think of as West African chocolate flavor. On the smell, that is dominant. I mean, there might be a little bit of a very lightly roasted coffee, but all the subtle complexity that they say is in this bar is I'm completely missing it. Again, nice chew. Um, we're at 82%. So that extra 4% fat content, and maybe it's a higher fat ratio in this one, it's giving me that more typical sort of Swissy feel about the melt on it. But still, there is this texture from the cocoa powder and the way it's produced, and I don't get it. Um, for me, it's instantly something that I would not want to go and actually spend money on these bars based upon the texture that I've got here. Now, I've got to assume that this is what is in production because it was at the Academy of Chocolate Awards. Um, but all of this, back end stuff that they're talking about, apricot, bergamot, orange blossom. So I think of sort of Orange Blossom and Jasmine, which is not here, but was in the previous one. Orange Blossom and Jasmine, I associate with Nacional. Um, Now, what I will say, right, if somebody is looking for a very high cocoa content chocolate and they want something which is not bitter, what I will say is these things are not bitter at all. There's nothing in here that screams bitterness. Also, sort of the flavor intensity as you start. I mean, there are lots of chocolates that are very high cocoa content and are not bitter, but they're very, very intense, right? So that intensity ramps up as the cocoa content goes up. There's nothing about these flavors that is intense either, right? Which is also very, very interesting. Um, I don't get the acidity. I mean, not there for me. Um, we look at the ingredients. So chocolate, cocoa butter, cocoa extract. So same ingredients as the previous one. What's interesting here is that uh, for me is that they have a polyphenol extract, and they're not using the polyphenol extract in the chocolate because it's not an ingredient unless they're combining the polyphenol extract back into the cocoa extract. Not clear to me what they're doing, and so it'd be interesting, in fact, if these are not marketed as high polyphenol chocolates, and so we'd be interested in knowing the fact. I'm going to do one more from this brand. I happen to have it here. It's not an award-winning brand, but this whole notion of um, sweetening chocolate with cacao fruit sugar, so taking the juice and the pulp and converting it into sugar is something that a lot of companies are trying to do, and for the most part, it failed. I mean, the Felkland version of this was the only inedible chocolate from them I think I've ever tasted. When Cacao Berry brought out the first whole fruit chocolate from the Berry Calabout product. So Cacao Berry is owned by Berry Calabout. The Evo Cow it was atrocious as well. The texture was off. It didn't melt properly. There was this funk from the acidity of the um, of the cacao juice. So if we're working with straight juice, it's high sugar, usually above 15 Brix, but it's also quite acidic, usually below about 3.5 pH. And if you don't get rid of the acidity and you try to sweeten a chocolate bar, you get all that acidity in the chocolate. So let's go up here. Let's see what the tasting notes. All right, they haven't translated out of the German or the Swiss German, right? Um, So floral notes, Schwarzi, dark, dunkler, herbal, Honig, might be mushroom. I'm sorry if I don't do it. Cocoa, with cacao, ending with a citric sourness. Citrus sour, I'm guessing, right? I'm sorry I didn't translate this in advance. Um, so the first hint of this for me is that citricity. Um, it's actually quite pleasant. It's not overwhelming. And one of the things that's really, really interesting about this is they've done a good job of taming the acidity of the cacao sugar. I mean, it's 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 not overwhelming as it often is. And so in that respect, they've done a very good job. This is the third chocolate. Still has the same powderiness, which I associate with coming with chocolates that are made by separating out the cocoa powder from the cocoa butter and then recombining them. Um, and if I have one criticism to make of the overall line from sort of a professional perspective, that would be it. Right? Um, um, that's my criticism of all these chocolates that I've tried so far. They are available, or they're going to be available soon in the United States. And if you run across them or you're intrigued by this idea, whether you'd want a chocolate which was deconstructed using a lot of high technology processes, whether you think it might be interesting for you. So let's do actually, it's offering to translate it for me. Floral note, black tea, dark herbal honey, coconut, subtle cocoa, the subtle cocoa and the pleasant citric acidity is what it is that I'm getting from this bar. All right. So having done that, again, if you know this brand, you think you agree with me, you disagree with me, you think you might be interested in following up on it, then please let me know in the comments, either on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or in the comments to this post on the Chocolate Life. And I do want to do a quick shout out to Mike from Encore Coffee Company, Encore Coffee Roasters. He was one of the guests that I visited during the cross country craft chocolate odyssey. And so why don't we jump directly there? So here's the homepage of the Encore website. We'll go through and we'll click to the shop chocolate, right? And what I've got, so one of the things that I did is that when I went to my first stop, which was Goodnow Farms, we'll get to them next, I picked up a bar and then I shared that bar with the people at Maverick, which was my second stop. And then I picked up a bar from Maverick and I shared it with Mike at Encore. And then I picked up a bar from Mike at Encore. And this is what it is. I actually shared one of them with a chocolate maker that I visited in Santa Fe. And what I've got is I've got the bar that was the bronze winner in the Craft Chocolate Challenge recently that I was a judge in, and that we, did a live stream of the awards. And so, Mike, I do have to say that the people that I presented the other bar to were very, very pleased with that bar, and so I left it behind with them. So anyway, so what I will say is that, I mean, it's a really, really nice, pleasant roasted aroma. It's not overly sweet on the nose in the bag, which is a good thing. This is a 50% milk chocolate. We're using cocoa camille beans. It's an interesting choice of the beans because the cocoa camille is known for a particular kind of fruitiness, sort of a bright cherry fruitiness, often. Right. And what we get on the nose after breaking it is a sort of nutty milkiness. Reminds me a little bit of, putting my nose in some cold roasted hazelnuts is the primary note on this. There's a nice bite, a nice melt, a nice chew. And there's a little interesting complexity. There's a little bit of the milkiness that comes through. The nuts go away. The milkiness comes through. Then there's some sweetness. Then the fruit of the cocoa camille comes through. And then it cleans out of the mouth really quickly. That fruitiness is still dominant, and very, very slowly it's evolving from that fruitiness back through milk. And it is the milk that lands on your tongue at the end. So there's this nice flavor evolution from the initial hint of fruit through the milk into the sugar, back into the milk. It's a nice texture. It's a nice bite and a nice chew, and it's a good job. And I do see why the judging panel, I was, awarded it as they did. So Mike is watching and wants to comment, which he says he likes the finish, somewhat like a chocolate-covered cherry cordial. Yeah, Mike, I don't disagree with you. For me, because we're using a fondant and we use invertase to cause the fondant to liquefy when we do the cherry, or we might also have some alcohol in it when we soak the cherry in alcohol. A cherry cordial is often, it's got that high alcohol hit, or it's very sweet. And what's nice about that is if you like that sort of cherry cordial note, and you don't want something which is overly sweet, then this is a good interpretation of the cocoa camille beans. I guess it was an intriguing choice to use the cocoa camille in that way, and then to be able to find a balance between that fruitiness and the sweetness and the milk was really interesting. And so this would be a really interesting thing to taste with another cocoa camille bean. I have another one, and maybe what we'll do is we'll do a side by side later if we have the time. So Mike, thank you very much for sharing that. And I appreciate that, and hopefully, so you don't need to know what the Encore website is. I'm going to be posting the links to all of these companies, and so if there is a chocolate that you're interested in purchasing, or you want to follow up with any one of the makers, within an hour or so of the end of the live stream, I will update the post, and all of the links to all of these companies that I mentioned will be in that post. So absolutely. But if you've tried any of these and you'd like to give me real-time feedback, how you think they're different from how I perceive them, please let me know. I'm interested in whether you're doing it live here or whether you do it after the fact. You can put them in the comments again on the Chocolate Life or on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. So from here, what I want to do is I want to go to the first place that I visited on my trip. So Goodnow Farms. So I left New York City, went to upstate northeastern Massachusetts, where my daughter lives, and I'd never been to Sudbury, Massachusetts, where Goodnow Farms is. And I took the opportunity to go visit Goodnow Farms. And if you haven't, if you go and click this sort of first leg Boston and Chicago, or the Prelude um, post, in one of these two, I'm going to guess it's in the Prelude post, that you'll see that I've posted some images and some thoughts about my visit to Goodnow Farms. And when I left with all of these chocolates. Now, I have to say that most of these chocolates have been eaten and have been used as gifts, but I have some left still for me today. There's one I'm not going to try. The one I'm not going to try is this black um, Urfa chili bar. And the reason why I'm not going to try it, even though it's probably one of my favorites of everything that I tasted from Goodnow Farms, is that because of the chili pepper, it's going to ruin my palate for everything else. So I'm not going to taste it today, but I can tell you, yum. It's delicious. So I want to start off with an origin that I'm familiar with. So this is from Mexico. Um, Let's see, make sure you can see that. It's from Mexico. This is an almendra blanca, so it's a white cocoa bean. It comes from the farm of Hacienda Jesus Maria, Vicente Casep. I visited the farm. I know Vicente. I don't know these particular beans. I haven't. I don't know that I've ever had a chocolate using these beans. I've tasted a lot other chocolates from this origin, but I do know. I do believe that beans from this farm, and it may be this bean in particular, was the third place winner in the best cocoa beans in Tabasco um, um, concurso, the contest that we had back in 2017 when I was working down there. So this is a 77%. Now, one of the things about all the Goodnow Farms bars is they have a cocoa butter press in their factory. If you look very, very closely, you can may be able to see the cocoa butter press. It's this white thing right here. So they have this cocoa butter press in their factory. And so when they add cocoa butter to any of their bars, the cocoa butter they make in-house. So a single origin, undeodorized cocoa butter, and it's the same origin that they're using for all their bars. Um, so without going into the details of the process here, one of the things that I will say about every single one of the roughly, what is it, dozen bars that I walked away with, every single one of these bars um, is extremely well made. There's nothing about their method of manufacture which you can find fault to. You may say, I don't like this one as much, or I like this one better. It's not to my cup of tea. So what's interesting about this one is that this is an Almendra Blanca, and let's say it's something called Carmelo, or C1 as it's known at INIFAP, the National Agricultural Institute, is that if this is in fact Carmelo, and it could be, that what's there's no indication on the bar, is that one of the things we know about this particular bean is that people tend to under ferment it, thinking that has a much higher percentage of Criollo. So they'll have fermented wrong, so it's under or over fermented. And what ends up with this is a acidic finish um, in the bar that's difficult to conch out. And so even though I can tell you that Good Now spends quite a bit of time in their melangers for each one of these bars. Um, the upfront of this is really quite nice, very, very basic. I mean, when you've got criollos, the idea is that every criollo makes a great chocolate. It's not the case. Criollos often are wonderful to eat when they're roasted, but man, putting them to chocolate can be a real challenge. And um, for me, what starts off as very, very pleasant um, is marred. I'm not saying it's ruined, but it's marred for me by the acidity on the back end. It comes out, and there is a small lactic quality to it that I'm not a fan of. However, I'm in the minority. It has won a silver and a bronze in the Academy, the International Chocolate Awards, and three bronzes at the Academy of Chocolate Awards. So a very highly awarded brand. Good Now may be the single most highly awarded chocolate maker in the United States by now, and they do a very good job. And it's easy to see why people like their bars. Um, the next one we're going to try, and we're rushing through these, is an Esmeraldas. So we're talking Ecuador. Costa Esmeraldas is 70%. It's part of their signature line, their single origin line, which includes the Mexico, an Academy of Chocolate Silver, an International Chocolate Award Silver, Good Food Awards, a Sophie Award winner, which is the Specialty Food Association here in the United States, and then also at the Northwest Chocolate Festival in 2018. Again, I cannot find any technical flaw or fault with any of the chocolates that I've tasted. The only question is, do you like or prefer it? This bar is a little crisper. The chew is a little crunchier. It's not because it's over crystallized. There's none of that. It's just a lower fat content in this particular bar. There's an overall brightness to this as a 70%. So there's a sense in which it is much sweeter than the Mexican, which is the case because the Mexican has got more sugar in it and is a lighter bean. The Mexican has less sugar in it, excuse me, and is a lighter bean. And so Esmeraldas can be a difficult origin to work with, or a difficult bean to work with. And I mean, if you want something that's a little brighter and is not aggressive in any of its flavors, then this could be a really, really good choice for you. However, it does end with a fair amount of astringency. It does end on that note. And there's sort of there's a minerality to the finish on the end after the astringency leaves your mouth. Again, some people may like that minerality. Obviously, some people do. Although this is produced in 2023, I'm guessing, and the awards were 2020, 2021, 2018, and so I don't know how these awards, how the chocolate that was awarded actually compares with the chocolate that I'm eating, and that's a challenge with the awards themselves more than anything. Has nothing to do with the way Good Now Farms is using the award. So I'm looking at the time, and there's a lot to get through. So what I want to say is, these guys have fun with flavor. So Good Now Farms, not only are they doing these wonderful, single origin bars as part of their signature line, a cafe con leche, this passion fruit and cream milk chocolate, this brown butter chocolate. You can see that they do things which have rye whiskey infusions, and here's a caramelized onion, which is really, really interesting. I think, it'd be a polarizing bar. If you like caramelized onions, there's an umami, oniony sweetness in here, which is really, really interesting. It's not overwhelming. It just doesn't jump out at you and beat you over the head with it. But it's really, really very, very interesting. And so if you're adventurous and you like flavored bars, I would definitely give that one a try. This maple sugar, so it's the Guatemalan. They also do a single origin bar, part of their signature series. So it might be interesting to get just the Guatemala bar, which you can see here, and the maple sugar bar, and to see how they differ. For me, there's a lot of maple in this. It's a very, 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 very mapley, and it's less about the cocoa. But for my daughter and her boyfriend's family, this was probably their favorite of all of the flavored bars. So just by a large margin, it was really well received. My particular favorite of all of the single origin bars is this Nicaragua. It just for us, hands down, this Nicaraguan single origin 77%. They're using beans from Giflaube and Cacao Bisiesto. This is not an Ingaman cacao, so it is slightly different from the other Nicaraguans you might be familiar with for his home, the Nicolizo, Rugoso, that entire line. So it's a different flavor because they're using different beans. The Monica and Tom do a really, really good job. Monica and Tom and their team do a really, really good job with this bar. So yeah, no, absolutely. Again, technically extremely well made. If you ever go to Boston, it's worth, if you don't have a car, renting a car, driving up to Sudbury, arrange your day so you can drive past Walden Pond. And so you can go visit you'll visit the pond, and there's a visitor center. It's a beautiful place to go. All right. So the next chocolate I'm going to try is from a New Mexican chocolate maker by the name of Eldora. And Eldora is in Albuquerque. Now, I went from um, Kansas City to Albuquerque via Santa Fe, so I spent a couple of days in Santa Fe. I didn't have time, I thought, to actually go and visit Eldora, so I didn't visit their workshop, but I managed to pick up a bar of their chocolate. Here's what the packaging looks like. I managed to pick this up while I was in Santa Fe. If you're ever in Santa Fe, what you wanted to go, not only do you have the Cacao Chocolate House, they got some interesting hot chocolates. Their bonbons were less interesting for me. And you have a small selection of chocolate bars, also very interesting. But in the rail yard area, there is this fabulous ice cream maker called La Lecheria, and La Lecheria uses some Eldora chocolate in one of their ice creams, and they have a small selection of the Eldora bars across the front. So this one is a chocolate bar, zesty mango pignon. So pignon, pine nuts, and pistachios grow in New Mexico. Yay! I mean, it's really, really nice. So it's an inclusion bar. The pine nuts are an inclusion on the back of the bar. Let's see if we can give you a little better view of what that looks like. And there is um, some mango powder in this. They're also using an ají chili, and there's some tangerine as well as five spice. So what I want to say is, if I do taste this for you, it's going to blow up my palate, and because of the ají chili. But again, like the black Urfa chili from Goodnow Farms, this is just a lovely bar. The tangerine balances the mango in a really, really interesting way. The texture of the pine nuts, one of my favorite nuts in nature, and again, locally harvested in New Mexico. The sort of the the way the ají chili affects different parts of your mouth. This is an extremely well balanced, really, really well made bar, and can't hardly recommend it higher if you like these kinds of things. And it is won in the International Chocolate Awards in 2021, the 2020-2021 round, bronze in the Americas round, and a silver in the world round. And this is something that you can see the awards here. This is something that's very, very interesting, which is some of these flavors, like the ají chili and the piñon, are not necessarily flavors that people outside the Americas are really, really familiar with. And even people in the Americas are not really familiar with a lot of these flavors. So what's always interesting for me is to see if it won an award in the Americas round, right? Did it, if it won an award in the world's round, was it awarded at the same level or a higher level? And it's interesting to me that, that when it went to the world's round, the judges at the world's round found this flavor combination more interesting in comparison with all the other bars that were entered. I think this is a really, really interesting thing for people to think about. You do want to make things which appeal to you. You do want to make things which appeal to your local market. And so I'm, here in Arizona now, and so I'm thinking all sorts of interesting Southwest flavors. But but it's interesting again, has to see how people and judges outside your region are going to react to these flavor combinations. And so something worth thinking about very, very closely. And that's one thing I noticed about this bar. Again, cannot recommend it more highly. Technically, it's an extremely well-made bar. There are no obvious defects in anything here. They're using Dominican cacao, Zorzal Dominican cacao. It's a good representation of the cocoa beans. It's of course masked by the chili and the bright fruity notes, but just really, really wonderful to think about and taste. Don't just think about it. Go out and taste it. So from here, what I want to do is I'm going to jump a little bit and I'm going to go to Orinoco Chocolate Company. So this is the group that I am working with. So I'm not an employee. This is a group that I'm working with here in Prescott, Arizona. And I am taking over an education and outreach component. So my job is to organize classes, both professional classes and recreational classes, and then to engage with the rest of the community, which we're defining as not just the state of Arizona, but it also includes every state that borders Arizona as well as Mexico. So I'm trying to do outreach. So I'm working with local wineries, local breweries, local spirits producers. There's a number of coffee roasters. We're going to be looking at cheese producers, bakers, and then to be able to just provide general education into this part of the United States. There's a Northwest Chocolate Festival, there's a Dallas Chocolate Festival, there's a DC Chocolate Festival. So I'm sort of staking, I'm looking, the Southwest represents an interesting opportunity for me. What I want to do is one of the reasons why I'm jumping to these Orinoco bars is that if you go to the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now, I want to find my cursor. If you go to the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now, what you'll do is you'll find that there's a special offer for this 5-bar sampler. So here are the 5 bars that we're talking about. So let me go and change the view. So here are the 5 bars that we're talking about. So 4 of these bars are from Venezuelan origins, and 1 is a Coco Camille. And I'm going to start off with the first bar. It's a 70%. Three of the 4 single origin bars are all in the 70s percentage. It's an interesting mold. Looks like a cacao pod. And this particular bar, which is the 70%, is a blend of the 3 different Venezuelan origins. So there's a Merida Criollo, there is a Patanemo, and then there's also a Pieroa. And the goal here is to work on the roast and work onto the ratios and get something which delivers a robust chocolate flavor. And all the chocolate that is produced is vegan, gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, and peanut-free. Right? And they don't use cane sugar in the chocolate. So this is sweetened with maple sugar. So technically very well made. There's a straightforward chocolate flavor, as I mentioned, balancing the 3 different origins, Venezuelan origins, which are the blend here. And because Orinoco does not make a milk chocolate. This 70% is is the most accessible to people who may not be dedicated craft chocolate followers. It's chocolate forward. It doesn't have any aggressive acidity or aggressive fruitiness. And at the end, just this little hint of the brightness of maple sugar at the end without actually being mapley, which is really interesting. Um, Now, that is very, very different from um, the single origins. We're going to start these from the highest cocoa content to the lowest cocoa content. So this 74%, and that is a criollo. So again, as a criollo, people think, oh, criollos make the best chocolate just because they're criollos, and it turns out that they can be among the most challenging of beans. And so, let me do this. So even though it is 74%, right? So it's a higher cocoa content, lower sugar content because the beans are paler. It looks more like a milk chocolate, um, but it doesn't taste like a milk chocolate whatsoever. I mean, this bar, um, I ate it from the thicker end of the pod rather than the thinner end of the pod. Um, there's a different bite on it, but the chew and the melt are really quite nice. Um, and there's this nice, um, we're going to get into sort of words like um, leathery, tobacco-y, a very light astringency, um, which is very, very pleasant. It's not an aggressive biting acidity, astringency. Um, and there's some citric fruitiness, which comes through the end. And so there's delicate, um, this nice, delicate evolution of flavor in this bar. Technically well made, nothing that you can call um, to task in terms of obvious defects in terms of the chocolate making, which is great. And one of the nice things at the end is this: after all of that sort of leathery, um, um, maybe oaky, maybe the tannins remind me where the astringency comes from might be either from the leathery component or the tobacco or wood component. Again, not aggressively leathery, not aggressively tobacco, not aggressively wood. Um, it ends up in this just really, really pleasant, um, simple chocolate flavor, and that's what you're left with. And so for me, for many people are looking at this bar and they're going, I'm not entirely sure because it's a 74%. Nonetheless, this is an origin that very, very few people have a chance to try themselves. And so it's really, really an interesting expression of those beans. And if you were to try the 70% of the blend, the number 3 blend, you would be hard pressed to say, okay, this bean is in that bar, um, which is when we're doing the tastings in the factory store is one of the things we do. We start off with the 70%, and then we'll look at one of the components in the 70%. So the next one is a 70% patanemo, and this is just straightforward, chocolatey, nutty, with a little bit of fruity acidity in the bottom, carrying everything. This is one of these chocolates where there's a slight hint of the maple, and it's a dark maple, so it's um, higher in minerality than some of the lighter maples are. And so while that minerality comes through and the little bit of mapliness comes through, it is definitely not a bright, sweet maple component. It's a darker, more bottomed. And this Patanemo is just a really, really pleasant bar. It's not one you're looking for to be challenged. If you're looking for a chocolate that's going to change your expectations about what flavors in chocolate are going to be, this is not one of them. But when we think of why Venezuela is famous for cacao, I mean, most people would think of, Chuao, Ocumare, other Maracaibo, Surtolago, and other places. This Patanemo, for me, man, it is one of the things that um, says, yeah, this is why Venezuelan cocoa is famed around the world for the kind of chocolate that it produces. It's just um, really a pleasant eating experience, both from a texture and melt perspective, but as well from the evolution of flavor perspective over time. Um, the third one is a Piaroa. So Piaroa is an area of the country which is along the border of Colombia and Venezuela. This is a 60%. And at this point, I know that I'm suffering a little palate fatigue from the number of chocolates that I've tried. Is there is this starts off with the fruitiness. Usually, I'm missing it this morning. It starts off with the fruitiness, it goes through some leather-ish, some tannins start to come through, and then some fruitiness. So, whereas the Mero de Criollo, I said it is nice, gentle evolution of flavor. This is, you know, more roller coastery. This boom, this initial hit, and then it goes all over the place, um, and it takes you on a journey of flavors. And again, ends on um, this nice um, chocolate bottom. So, um, uh, and this is one of the reasons why in the store we offer these as a flight for people. They walk out of the store with an insulated tote and all five of these bars, so they can go and enjoy this at their leisure at home. The final one is Coco Camilli, um, and what's really interesting, Mike, um, you know, is that cherry aspect of this bar is very, very much there. It's a citric acidity, so it's a fruit acid acidity, and very, very nice. Um, and it comes through, and especially tasting it right after the Fioruoa, that the cherryness of it is right up front and just really, really lovely. But I've got your milk chocolate, Mike, and I'm going to taste it with the um, the cocoa camille in the mouth. Um, and what's really interesting about this is that when I go from the cocoa camille and the 70% to your 50% milk, what happens is it emphasizes the cocoa and the roast in this bar. The fruit is de-emphasized, um, except at the very end, it comes through more strongly than it does on its own. And this is an exercise that, whether you're mixing a milk chocolate and dark chocolate, or you have an opportunity to use two different interpretations of the same chocolate. So I got two different cocoa camilles, from maybe one from a maker in Europe, maybe one from a maker in the United States. You might have a 2 ingredient version, or you might have a 3 ingredient version. You'll have something which is sweetened with a different sugar instead of using cane sugar, maple sugar, or something like that. It's often really, really interesting, and it's one of my favorite horizontal flight concepts, is to take 3 or 4 makers, different makers who are using beans that are roughly the same. So all from Coco Camilli, all from the same harvest, is a really, really fun and interesting thing to do. And I could recommend it. And if you're going to mix and match darkened milk, it's really interesting to see. Try one first and then try the other, then see how one affects the other. It's really, really a whole lot of fun to do. So this is Orinoco Chocolate Company. It, again, full disclosure, I'm here. It's what I'm doing. I'm not involved in the manufacturing of the chocolate on a day-to-day basis. I'm working on outreach and education. And if you stay tuned to the Chocolate Life, we're going to start announcing some of the professional classes that we're going to be doing. And one of the things we want to do a little bit differently is professional classes. They'll be in production, so we'll be working on product which is going to be sold, which is very different. So everybody will be, GMP booted up with hair nets and beard nets and appropriate footgear. And if you don't have the appropriate footgear, you're going to have footies over your shoes. But we're going to be working on equipment that a lot of people don't generally have access to. So for why would you as a small chocolate maker want to have a small one-shot depositing machine? And if you could get a one-shot depositing machine, which was less expensive than getting a mold loader and a very, very high-end depositing head, why wouldn't you think about using a one-shot machine to deposit your bars and then have the flexibility to be able to use that one-shot machine for doing other things? And so having a class teaching one-shot depositing, because in terms of improving efficiency, productivity, and variety in terms of the products that you can produce. So that's the approach we're going to be taking to our professional classes. There's not going to be a professional class that you can find a version of it from someplace else. So that's, I think, one of the great things we're doing. And I also want to remind you, everybody, that if you go to the Chocolate Life right now, and through the end of May, we're offering the 5-bar sampler at a special price. You can click on this link at the top of the page, order today, and there's an explanation of, what is included in the pack. And if you order in the next day or so, we can get this out to you in time for Mother's Day, because included at no additional charge are 2 strawberry gianduja hearts. So again, strawberry gianduja hearts. It's not a white chocolate. It is a combination of desiccated coconut powder, desiccated cocoa nut, cashew refined in with cocoa butter, and the maple sugar, which then has strawberry powder refined into it as well. And the filling is a house-made hazelnut cream. So that's what the strawberry gianduja hearts are that are part of the author. So with that, we have a few minutes left. If you're there, if you've got a question, ask the question. If you've got a comment, leave the comment. I'll be happy to do that. And there's one final bar I'd like to touch before I go today. And this is a bar from a company that I did mention in a previous live stream. We did a live stream on packaging. And this is Terroir chocolate from the Onyx Coffee Company. So let me just quickly jump back here. And here's the website. Now, one of the things that Onyx did many years ago is that it revolutionized, to some extent, the coffee industry, because they publish the costs. So here what you do is you get the farm gate price, right? You have the purchased price. So the purchase price, I'm going to guess, might be the delivered price. It's not clear here what it is, what that means, but they have the commodity price on the day that the product was purchased. So it does have the farm gate price. It does have the commodity price. The purchase price, it's not clear. So the difference in this case, this is a Uganda Semiliki forest. The commodity price was $242. The farm gate price was $232. So they're paying below market, right? But there's a purchase price of $795. It doesn't indicate the distribution of that. So how much of that might have been left in the producing country, and how much is transportation to the port, from the port in Uganda to the port in the United States, and then transportation from the port to the factory. It's not entirely clear how that distribution is done, but just thinking about that. These guys are coffee roasters, so you'd assume they know what it is that they're doing when it comes to roasting cocoa beans. And again, technically these things, it's hard to fault them from a technical perspective at all. This bar is from Uganda. They're using sourdough breadcrumbs. It's a vegan milk chocolate, so it doesn't have an ingredient. The ingredients list is on the back, so they're using oat milk powder. Right. So this doesn't smell of particularly anything other than stale bread and maybe stale oat bread, not even toasted oat bread. That's the predominant note on this. I'm not making a judgment. I mean, I'm not a big fan of oat milk um, as a plant-based alternative milk in my coffee. There's a nice crunch from the sourdough. The sourdough is nondescript. Um, this is a milk chocolate. They don't indicate the percentage of cocoa content on here. Um, so ingredients: cacao, cocoa butter, cane sugar, oat milk powder, sourdough breadcrumbs. What I will say, and this is what I think my observation for all of these bars, they're incredibly competently well made. Um, but and they may be great in terms of taking specialty coffee and roasting specialty coffee extremely well and providing a really, really good specialty coffee experience, whether you're doing that in a specialty coffee shop or if you've brought the beans and you're making it home. What's disappointing about, and I would say this about every single one of I've tried 3 of the terroir bars from Onyx, is they're bland, they're boring. I mean, there's nothing that screams to me about anything like Uganda in this bar. There's a brightness from the sugar, there's oat powder, there's breadcrumbs, but there's nothing that says Uganda. It could be almost any other cocoa bean in the world, and I don't know that the experience would be very different. And I think that's my big disappointment when it comes to these bars from Onyx. I mean, they have another one here, Colombia. It's a Tumaco is where the origin is. It's got peanuts and sesame. It's a 62%. So again, on the sweet side, it has peanuts on the back, right? So they're not as an inclusion. The sesame is on the back. It's not ground into the chocolate. It's on the back. So, your perception of this is going to depend on whether you put the inclusions on your tongue or whether you put the inclusions on the roof of your mouth. Um, the salt is also on the outside. It doesn't appear to be refined into the chocolate because you get an instant hit of salt when you put these in your mouth. And for me, again, technically incredibly well made. I'm not going to say anything about no obvious defects. Um, so there is a little bit of fruitiness, and I can assume the fruitiness can only come from the cacao. It's a flavor that I might associate with Tumaco, but I don't know where in Tumaco these come from. So there's a great deal of variety of beans and fermentation profiles from that region. I don't think they're declaring specifically where they're coming from in Tumaco. But the most interesting thing about this bar um, is the interplay of the sugar and the salt at the very beginning. So you've got this really sweet salt thing. It's not overwhelmingly sweet. It's not overwhelmingly salty. But again, I don't know that this says anything special about Tumaco, Colombian cocoa. You could use cocoa from many other places that have this citricity, and it would be the same or perhaps even better. There is some ending note on the sesame in particular, but not a whole lot of peanut in here. There are tasting notes, which are on the front, say whiskey, caramel, and molasses. Yeah, those are really, really sophisticated. I think that anybody who's tasting this for the first time will get the sweet salt hit. They'll get the sesame at the end. There might be some minerality that we'd associate with molasses, but none of the sweetness that I would associate with molasses. Either whiskey or an overcooked caramel. That might be where it's like a dark caramel as opposed to a light caramel. So for me, it's a little mishmash. If I walk into a specialty coffee store, one of the things that I want to do first, if I'm buying a specialty coffee, is I drink that coffee black, and I'm probably going to want to get a V60 pour over. And I'm going to want to make sure that it's a specific roast because I want to understand what the flavor of the bean is. And it's only after I taste it the first time that I'm going to add any sort of flavoring to it. So I might add dairy. I never add sugar. and I'm not into adding any flavorings whatsoever. I want to start off with the chocolate, tasting the chocolate. Um, and so I think that what I would say is if you walk into your local specialty coffee store and your call is um, something which contains a lot of milk and maybe has a pumped syrup in it, or has got, some sort of, some sort of powder over the top, a flavored powder over the top, then the two bars that I tasted today are more likely aimed at you as a consumer, right? These two bars, the two, the dark chocolate Colombian with peanut and sesame, um, and the vegan milk with sourdough breadcrumbs from Uganda. These are not bars. I don't think that these are bars which are going to say to a craft chocolate maker who's interested in understanding the unique varietal characteristics of the origin of the beans that are used, these chocolates are not going to be of interest to them. And I'm really kind of wondering why they're doing this, right? Because Onyx, as a coffee roaster, is all about the specialty beans that they're using and bringing out the differences in varietal complexity in each of those beans. And I think that by doing all this focus on inclusions and flavorings, I think they've lost the essence of what it is that they are as a brand. But again, what I will do is I will make sure that links to all of these companies are in the post for today's live stream. And so here is, I believe, the live stream. Let me share that with everyone. So here is the live stream. I have to go back and forth between two different screens. So here's the post for today's live stream. At the moment, there's just a placeholder here. I'm going to put links to all of the companies. I didn't know how many I would get to, so I didn't put them all in. I'm going to put links to the companies that I tasted so you can go and learn more, perhaps purchase any of these chocolates if any of them, interest you. Again, I haven't had anything to eat this morning. I went straight. Started eating chocolate at 9 o'clock in the morning. Usually, I try to wait until 11 or so before I start eating chocolate in the day, and so um, I'm I'm dealing with that. And so I apologize. But listen, this has been a lot of fun for me to taste the chocolates in an informal way, just to give you impressions, not think about, judging them, in an awards against each other. It's fun to go through these kinds of tastings. And let me know, were there any particular chocolates that you thought were interesting? Some things you think you'd like to go out and seek? Let me know, whether it's in the comments, YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or whether join the Chocolate Life, become a member, so that you can comment on thechocolatelife.com. And with that, I want to one quick note. This coming Tuesday, my guest is going to be Nicolo Corallo. And so Nicolo is the son of Claudio Corallo, who many may know as this iconoclastic chocolate maker working in Sao Tome and Principe. So, and Claudio is on the island of Principe, making first as a coffee grower and then as a chocolate maker. So we're going to be talking about Nicolo's involvement in on the island, what he's doing now, what it was like being on the island younger, his move from full-time from Principe to Lisbon, and what it is that he's doing in Lisbon. Just a really, really interesting conversation. He's a great guy, and has got I think, an interesting take on what is going on in this, actually historically, in many ways, important and influential origin of chocolate. And with that, I want to say thanks for everybody who started, who's watched through to the entire end, and to remind everybody that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you are doing it wrong, right? Until Tuesday, ciao everyone, and have a great weekend.